A very good afternoon to everybody. As you all aware that month of September is being celebrated as 4th Rashtriya Poshan Ma. So on this very special occasion and on behalf of Department of Food and Public Distribution, I warmly welcome you all to attend the webinar session on Rice Fortification, a complementary approach to address nutritional anemia. Today, we have called upon the experts in the field from the organizations like FSSAI and WFP to throw some light on this intriguing issue of rice fortification. So without wasting any further time, let me take this opportunity to invite Sri Bishop Prajoli, the country director from the World Food Programme, to give his opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Rima. Good afternoon. Secretary of Food and Public Distribution, Sri Sudhanshu Pandeyji, Secretary, Women and Child Development, Sri Indavar Pandeyji, Joint Secretary, Department of Food and Public Distribution, Sri S. Jagannathji, Director, FSSAI, Ms. Inoshi Sharma, other senior government officials, my colleagues from WFP, Dr. Sarika Yunus, and others, and partners. It is indeed a true pleasure for me to join and share a few thoughts at this important webinar on rice fortification, a complementary approach to address nutrition. I want to, on the onset, really congratulate the team from the Ministry of Women and Child Development, and of course, Department of Food and Public Distribution, and also my own colleagues for putting this together. I was really delighted to hear Honorable Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi's speech on Independence Day in Red Fort. Him announcing food fortification will be one of the key complementary interventions of the government to address anemia under Poshan Abhiyan. We want to really congratulate the government of India most sincerely for this step and leaving nothing behind to address concern related to malnutrition in India. It is clear, unless India achieves zero hunger, eliminates malnutrition, the world will not achieve it either. I think each of us attending this and participating in this webinar is convinced that food fortification is in particular, fortified rice offers many advantages in preventing micronutrient deficiencies and is an excellent complementary step to other nutrition improvement strategies. Food fortification and rice fortification are evidence-based interventions. A large body of evidence exists, including a recent systematic review and meta-analysis of large-scale food fortification program, which confirmed the impact of fortification on nutritional outcome. Currently, over 140 countries globally have guidance or regulations in place for fortification program, the majority of which are mandatory. 85 countries mandate at least one kind of cereal grain, maize, rice, or wheat fortification with iron and folic acid, and over 40 countries mandate the fortification of edible oil, margarine, and or sugar with vitamin A and or vitamin D. Also, food fortification is not new to India, given its experience on salt digestion and banaspati ghee fortification. All the addition of the Copenhagen Consensus in 2004, 8, and 12 found fighting malnutrition, and in particular vitamin and mineral deficiencies, should be a top priority for governments and philanthropists. The 2012 edition of Copenhagen Consensus identified micronutrient intervention, including large-scale fortification, as the #1 priority. Globally, the history of fortified rice dates back to 1940s. In the Indian context, the history of rice fortification goes back to the mid to late 2000, when ultra rice technology was tested in India. In the last 10 years, the rice fortification technology has been further developed. During this period, several large-scale pilots in government scheme efficacy trials have been conducted with positive outcome in the states of Karnataka, Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, which have shown a very positive outcome. In fact, several countries in the region have learned from India, are now pursuing fortified rice in the open market and in social protection programs. Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and also in Middle East. I have personally had an experience in Egypt, fortification of wheat for all the public distribution program there. WP has a long and diverse history of fortification in India and many other countries. The experiences ranges from production and distribution of fortified blended food to stable food fortification of both wheat flour and rice, and point of use fortification of hot cooked meals in government food-based safety nets. I commend and congratulate the Department of Food and Public Distribution, and in particular, Secretary Pandey for his leadership and rollout and implementation of centrally sponsored scheme on fortified rice, which would provide learning and experiences for wider scale up as and when needed, and other stakeholders in the government for the creation of an enabling environment for rollout of fortified rice. I also want to commend and congratulate the Ministry of Women and Child Development on the month-long celebration and sensitization of communities on different aspects of nutrition through the Poshan Ma. Sadly, there are still some myths and misconceptions around fortified rice. The Poshan Ma provides a good platform to address these misconceptions as well as sensitize the implementer of the safety net. It is with this dual purpose that this webinar adds greater value and really plays a very important role. Last 2 years have been most difficult period for millions of people across the world due to COVID pandemic, as all aspects of the food and nutrition security, namely availability, access, stability, job opportunities, have been jeopardized to some extent, including diversity of meals on the plate. The swift response by the Government of India and the crucial role played by the Ministry of Food, FCI, has helped ameliorate the food situation in India under the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana and several other commendable efforts along with the state government. WP remains committed to working alongside the Government of India on ensuring nutrition security for its population through a series of proven interventions, including rice fortification. We thank you for a strong cooperation and partnership. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I want to wish a good deliberation and a successful exchanges and very successful expansion of this program across India. Thank you very much indeed. Back to you.
Thank you, Vishwa. Thank you for your encouraging comments and setting this context for this important agenda. So taking the session forward, I would request Dr. Sharika Yunus, the head of Nutrition and School Feeding Unit from World Food Program, to share some important insights into the process and the concepts of rice fortification. Dr. Sharika comes with over 10 years of experience in the area of food fortification, and it will be a delight to hear her out on this important issue. Over to you, Sharika ma'am.
Sorry for the lag at my end. Just give me a minute while I get my screen up and start presenting. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this webinar on fortified rice. As has been laid out by Bishu Parajuli, the country director for the World Food Programme, the attempt through this webinar is to sensitize people on what is fortified rice, what are the advantages of fortified rice, and also at the same time to address certain myths and misconceptions around fortified rice that may exist both in the community as well as in the minds of the program implementers in the field. With that, first to set the context, why and why, where and why do we think the role of fortification comes in? We do know that anemia continues to be a problem in the country. India regularly conducts the National Family Health Surveys of every 4 to 5 years. And between the National Family Health Survey 3, which was conducted in 2005-06, and the National Family Health Survey 4, which was conducted in 2015-16, there's been improvement in the prevalence of anemia. There's been a reduction. However, if you look at the reduction over a 10-year period, the reduction has been slightly lesser than expected, and therefore perhaps more needs to be done to continue to achieve reduction and achieve reduction in the prevalence of anemia at a faster rate. We also have some data from the National Family Health Survey 5, which is available for about 22 states and union territories. There again, anemia is getting flagged as an important concern. The prevalence of anemia in non-pregnant women has been seen to increase in the 15 out of the 22 states for which data is available. The prevalence of anemia in men is also seen to increase in 12 of the 22 states, as is the prevalence of anemia in children in about 18 out of the 22 states. I'll just take a moment more on this particular slide to also flag that the World Health Organization establishes 40% as a cutoff in the prevalence of anemia, and any prevalence of anemia which is more than 40% is classified as a severe public health problem. Now we know that anemia is a problem in the country. What are the causes of anemia? And here what I have is the conceptual framework for malnutrition. Anemia or micronutrient deficiencies is the third arm of what we call as the triple burden on malnutrition. There are certain immediate causes to the causation of malnutrition and anemia. There are certain underlying causes as well as basic causes. And what we require is a multi-sectoral convergent approach to address anemia as well as malnutrition in all its forms across the different sectors. And that is where the role of food fortification also comes in. It's a part of the overall response. It's not a panacea. It's not a magic bullet. It's a part of a set of complementary responses which the government already has in place and which are being implemented on the ground. Now, comparing the intake of different micronutrients amongst Indians with the recommended dietary allowances for those micronutrients set out by the National Institute of Nutrition in 210, again in 220, and then comparing what is the intake. There's been a slight change in the RDAs between 210 and 220. Some of the RDAs have gone up, whereas some have come down. But despite that, there continues to be a gap in intake versus what is the recommended dietary allowance. The gap is across micronutrients and it's across all the age groups. Like I said, there are several strategies to address micronutrient deficiencies and anemia. Each strategy or whatever is implemented needs to be decided by governments based on the context. For governments and countries where the prevalence is high, what we need is a concerted approach, bringing all the strategies together. Because with just one strategy in place, it may not be possible to look at the sort of reductions or to achieve the sort of reductions that we would want to achieve. The strategies which exist are dietary diversification. It is the most long-term and the most important strategy. However, there are, even with dietary diversification, there are certain on-ground contextual issues that need to be considered. The other strategies include iron and folic acid supplementation, already in place by the government of India, food fortification, for which excellent steps have been taken. Then there are other public health measures such as use of insecticide-treated bed nets, vaccination, and nutrition and health education. A lot of these are being directly implemented by the government, and for a lot there is already action which is in place, and the government is committed, to the best of my mind, on all the 5 strategies that we have here. Implementation of one strategy does not take away from the importance or the implementation of the other strategies, and that is the overall hope with which the government of India is moving forward. Now, what exactly is food fortification? Food fortification is the deliberate increasing of content of essential micronutrients in a food vehicle so as to improve the nutritional quality of the food vehicle, as well as provide a public health benefit with minimal risk to health. So the concept of doing no harm is built into the very definition and the very concept of food fortification. As allowed by the government of India, there are 5 staples that can be fortified. These are oil, milk, wheat, rice, and salt. As already spoken by the country director, World Food Program, India has an illustrious history in the space of food fortification, with iodized salt emerging as a premier example. There are several benefits to food fortification as well. It helps in maintaining the body store of the nutrients more efficiently and effectively because it is continuously consumed as a part of the diet. It does not require any behavior change on the part of the community. There is a scope to address multiple micronutrient deficiencies in one go rather than targeting one deficiency at a time. And it is by and large cost effective for implementation. In India, why do we think fortified rice is a good vehicle for fortification? Primarily because it is the staple for about 70% of the Indian population, irrespective of whether which of the country or region we are in. It tends to be the staple for 70% of the population. It also forms a large part of our calorie source and is a core component of agriculture and nutrition. If we look at our food-based safety nets, it's abundantly distributed through all the 3 food-based safety nets, the PDS, the MDM, and the ICDS, and is universally available through them. The different demonstration projects on the field have explained to us and reflected to us that fortified rice is well accepted by the community. There is no taste change, no aroma change in the final product, and it cannot be distinguished from unfortified rice. The micronutrients in fortified rice with the technology that is available are stable, and there is minimal loss of micronutrients. It's an evidence-based, scientifically proven strategy with several countries around the world implementing it. The technology is simple, cost-effective, and well-established, and the shelf life of fortified rice is close to 24 months. Emerging research from other countries establishes that the shelf life can go on also to 36 months. Also to add that fortification of rice is also important because when during the process of milling, there are several micronutrients that get removed. And fortification of rice provides us an opportunity to add back what's been removed, but additionally to also add micronutrients which may not necessarily be a part of the original rice matrix, such as vitamin B12, iron, and zinc, and vitamin A. Please bear with me while I get this slide. I'm trying to show a little video on the process of fortification. Fortification of rice is a 2-step process, as was shown through this particular video. The first step involves the production or the creation of the fortified rice kernels. And in step 2, these fortified rice kernels are then blended with regular rice in a ratio of 1:100. The micronutrients that are present in the fortified rice kernel, as allowed and mandated by the government of India, are iron, folic acid, and cyanocobalamin or vitamin B12. The process of fortification, like I said, a two-step process. In the two-step process, the production of fortified rice kernels. For the production of fortified rice kernels, there are available a set of. Could I please
Sorry to
request
interrupt. Yeah.
everybody to put their mic on mute, please, so that I can continue with the presentation. The production of fortified rice kernels is aimed at ensuring that it is as similar to the base rice as possible. And these are just some examples of how the fortified rice kernel can look like. The fortified rice kernel can be matched to resemble in shape, size, and color any variety of base rice which is available. Whether it's the smallest mini mogra or the long grain basmati, fortified rice kernels can easily match up to the base grain which is available. We've talked a lot about the process of production of fortified rice kernel as well as fortified rice. Just to also put forth that for the supply of fortified rice kernels, there is a huge market, which is there is a huge production base which is already available in India, which about 38 FRK manufacturers, which have close to an installed capacity of 95,000 metric tons per annum. So governments need to procure from these FRK manufacturers. Most of these FRK manufacturers are Indian based. It is completely a made in India initiative, with most of the FRK manufacturers producing the FRK within India. And I'm sure as and when the presentation gets out, you can also see for yourselves that most of them are Indian suppliers. This is my last slide, and I just wanted to take a minute to explain how the rice, the overall model of how the rice will be fortified in the country and then distributed. And the model that I have here, there could be several models of doing it within the food-based safety net supply chain. But the model that we have here and the model with which the government of India is going forward is the most cost-effective model. In the rice supply chain, paddy is procured from the farmers and then given to the rice millers for processing. While the paddy is being processed and converted into rice, that is the stage when the rice would further be fortified and converted into fortified rice. This fortified rice will then be picked up by the storage godowns and stored in the storage godowns by the Food Corporation of India, and then further distributed through the food-based safety nets. All the bags of the fortified rice will have a +F logo on it so that they're easily identifiable during the distribution process. I'll stop here, and my co-panelist, Ms. Inoshi Sharma, will further address some of the myths and misconceptions around fortified rice. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sharika, for an insightful presentation. So it was such glad to hear you sharing a detailed process of rice fortification and the concepts in detail, and also reiterating the fact that rice fortification remains a complementary approach to tackle nutritional anemia. Now, with this, I would like to invite Ms. Inoshi Sharma, the Director, FSSAI, to share some of the important facts about the myths and misconceptions that are revolving around the area of rice fortification, which is in turn creating a lot of apprehensions among the larger audiences. Ms. Inoshi Sharma is an IRS officer who works for the FSSAI. She is involved in social and behavior change communication, Eat Right India campaign, and also making efforts for the scaling up of rice fortification in the country. Now, over to Ms. Inoshi Sharma for taking us through the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and a very good afternoon to all the esteemed members of this panel. This is a very short presentation that I thought would be a very nice thing to share, because this is the feedback that we, usually get from the field regarding the perception that people have about rice fortification. So broadly, what are the questions that usually come to us? That one, rice can't be fortified. In fact, we do get a lot of questions from the states asking us that we have a particular type of rice, can that be fortified instead of white rice? Then the question that we are asked is addition of FRK, does it lead to a change in the taste and the cooking methodology? Or does the nutrient of the fortified rice get lost during the cooking stage? Is it plastic rice? How do you identify fortified rice? What is the difference between fortification and biofortification? And if brown rice is healthier than fortified rice, then why not just adopt that? And it's not really acceptable to consumers, so why are we going forward with it? And in the long run, will it make us dependent on it? So these were some of the questions which I thought we can take up one by one. So one of the myths that we have is that not all types of rice can be fortified, which is not true at all. FRK can be made, the fortified rice kernel can be made from any rice flour and vitamin B12, which is then blended together and given the shape of a rice kernel and mixed with the rice in the ratio of 1 FRK to 100 pieces of, say, the rice. So the basis, the color of the rice, the flour that we are using, the color of the rice can be matched. Even the taste, even the smell, everything remains the same. It does not really change. The next thing is that what we were just discussing was that the taste, smell, and the cooking of rice in which FRK has been mixed is different, which is not interesting. Example I can give you is here in FSSAI itself for our lunches or whenever we use fortified rice, and many times people don't even realize that they are having fortified rice. And the first reaction is, oh, but it tastes just the same. It looks just the same. And that is the whole beauty of it, that there is no difference in storage, in preparation, in smelling, nothing at all. It is just a myth people have that there is something different in it. Even the preparation is the same. In fact, the FRK is made in such a way through the extrusion technology that the Indian way of preparing rice, in which we are soaking or we are washing, it will make sure that the micronutrients which are added are not lost. So they are retained, and to cover, in fact, any of these losses, certain overages are already built into the standards where a wide range is given. There are some myths which are there regarding plastic rice, and we had in fact created a short video. It is just for 2 minutes. There are many such videos, but I thought I could just share it here. Is it okay if I just play the video?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
जब राजू को अपने महीने के राशन का चावल मिला, तो उसने देखा कि कुछ चावल के दाने बाकी दानों से अलग लग रहे थे। राजू को कुछ ठीक नहीं लगा। उसने इस बारे में अपने दोस्त देव से बात की।
देव, मैंने इस बार फोर्टिफाइड चावल लिया था, जिसमें सूक्ष्म पोषक तत्व मिले हुए हैं, पर मुझे इसमें प्लास्टिक जैसा कुछ दिखाई दे रहा है।
मैंने भी सुना है कि आजकल प्लास्टिक के चावल आम चावल में मिलाकर बेचे जा रहे हैं। इसके बारे में मैंने एक वीडियो भी देखा है, जिसमें उन्होंने चावल से बॉल बना दी थी।
क्या ये सच है? अब हम इस चावल का क्या करें?
राजू, आज पड़ोस में हमारे एरिया के फूड सेफ्टी ऑफिसर आए हुए हैं, चलो उनसे ही पूछते हैं।
राजू और देव ने अपने एरिया के फूड सेफ्टी ऑफिसर से मिलकर इस बारे में बात की।
सर देखिए, इस फोर्टिफाइड चावल में कुछ दाने अलग दिख रहे हैं।
घबराइए नहीं। एफएसएसएआई के निर्देश के अनुसार चावल में सूक्ष्म पोषक तत्वों को सही मात्रा में मिलाया जा रहा है। इन्हें कहते हैं फोर्टिफाइड चावल। फोर्टिफाइड चावल के दाने चावल का पाउडर और सूक्ष्म पोषक तत्व जैसे विटामिन B12, फॉलिक एसिड और आयरन को सही मात्रा में मिलाकर बनाए जाते हैं। फिर इन्हें आम चावल के साथ 1 दाना प्रति 100 दाने के अनुपात में मिलाया जाता है।
अच्छा, पर ये बॉल जैसा क्यों हो जाता है?
पके हुए चावल में 80% स्टार्च होता है और कार्बोहाइड्रेट की अधिक मात्रा होने के कारण चावल चिपकता है और इसमें लचीलापन आता है। और हाँ, किसी भी तरह के चावल को चिपकाकर इस तरह की बॉल बन सकती है।
ये तो आपने बिल्कुल सही बात बताई, लेकिन क्या फोर्टिफाइड चावल रख रखाव और पकाने के तरीके में कोई फर्क होता है?
जी नहीं, फोर्टिफाइड चावल के रखरखाव, स्वाद और पकाने की विधि आम चावल जैसी ही होती है। हमें फोर्टिफाइड चावल को अपने रोजाना के खाने में प्रयोग करना चाहिए ताकि हमें और हमारे परिवार को सही पोषण मिल सके। इसके साथ साथ सभी चावल उत्पादकों को भी फोर्टिफाइड चावल उपलब्ध करवाने चाहिए ताकि हम सब इससे स्वास्थ्य लाभ ले सकें।
आपने तो हमारी आंखें ही खोल दी। अब हम अपने और अपने परिवार के लिए फोर्टिफाइड चावल ही लाएंगे।
फूड सेफ्टी एंड स्टैंडर्ड्स इंडिया द्वारा जारी की जा रही
I request other participants other than the speakers to keep their mic on mute, please.
So FSSAI has also come out with the plus F logo, which has to be placed on fortified staples, including fortified rice when it is made. And in the end, the tagline which is there regarding Sampoorn Poshan Swasth Jeevan is optional. And every package of fortified rice or fortified staple with iron has to carry a statement saying not recommended for people with thalassemia and people on low iron diet. Then sometimes a lot of questions is also being asked in recent times regarding fortification and biofortification. So what is primarily the difference? Now, rice fortification happens after the rice is harvested and micronutrients are added. But in case of biofortification, the micronutrient content is increased through breeding or genetic modification, and it takes place before the harvesting of the crop. That means the seed itself has those nutrients which are put in the soil. Now, in case of rice fortification, multiple nutrients can be added, and the composition of the micronutrients can also be changed. Their potency can be changed depending on studies and the kind of outcomes we find among people in terms of the bioavailability and in terms of the improvement in their nutritional status. In case of biofortification, there is a limitation in terms of the nutrients which are available, and once a biofortified variety is prepared with a fixed micronutrient composition, it cannot be modified. So why I wanted to show this was that rice fortification in the long run is something which is more doable, and it provides us with a lot of options of bringing about changes in terms of the micronutrients which have been added, and even the levels can be increased or decreased. Now, the next thing is there is generally a myth and a lot of discussions when happen. A lot of people come up and say that traditionally we were eating brown rice or red rice or parboiled rice. It is so healthier because we are moving away from it and we are eating white rice. Therefore, the problem is coming. So why are we going for this particular kind of fortification? Now, that is maybe to a certain extent true. But what we have also found out is that a vast majority of people who are eating white raw rice are not getting the nutrients which even say the brown rice advocates are claiming. So if we just look at this particular table in terms of the availability of folic acid and iron and B12, B12 is not there in brown rice or in parboiled rice. Folic acid is there, iron is there. But when we compare to a fortified raw rice, there is no comparison. Folic acid is only 11 in brown rice, whereas in a fortified rice it is 21 mg. And in case of iron, it is only 1. And in case of fortified rice, it is going up to 4.9. Then the next thing is, of course, that fortified rice is not acceptable to consumers and that they don't want to change the way they have been cooking and all. So for this, a simple advocacy, a simple messaging in districts where the rice is being launched can easily be done. In fact, FSSAI had in Madhya Pradesh in 2 of the districts where the Anganwadi centers are there, carried out with the help of NI, one of the development partners, a mini distribution of khichdi and kheer, which was made of fortified rice, and survey was done in which feedback of the people was taken, and they all readily accepted the food and said that given a choice, they would prefer to have this rice to be cooked at home because of the added benefits. So the myth that we have that consumption of fortified rice in the long run will make us dependent on external or applied nutrition also, of course, does not hold true, for the simple reason that the FRK, which has these micronutrients, the levels can always be changed. Interventions such as fortification are meant to be periodically reviewed for its impact, and adjustments can easily be done. So these were just some of the myths and facts which I thought would be a good thing to share. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Inushiji, for sharing such an interesting presentation about myths and misconceptions. I'm sure our participants are now well equipped with enough knowledge and can take a right decision so as to what to choose from what is available in the market. With this, I take this opportunity now to welcome the very respectable Secretary MWCD, Shri Indavar Pandeji, to give some key remarks. Over to Secretary MOWCD.
Pallavi Agrawal.
Okay, sure.
Joint Secretary
I think Joint
MWCD.
Secretary MWCD, Srimati Pallavi Agarwal ji is online. May we request her to kindly address the gathering. Srimati Pallavi Agarwal.
A very good afternoon to everyone. The secretary is just joining, so if he could continue with the seminar and he can be called later. So he's just joining.
Okay, sure. Thank you, ma'am. So till we wait for Secretary MOWCD to join, I would request the very respected Shri Sudhanshu Pandeji, the Secretary of Department in Food and Public Distribution, to share some keynote address.
Good afternoon. First of all, my sincere thanks to WFP and Mr. Parajuli in particular and his team and all other stakeholders, FSSAI, WCD, and other participants for having put together this wonderful seminar today. I think it's a very momentous time in the public distribution system's history that such a major decision has been taken for huge quantities that are distributed in the public distribution system in India. Challenges have just started. Journey is not going to be smooth. All of us will have to work over time, put systems in place, because in public administration, the scale of operations is such, and the people with whom you deal, their awareness level is such that we often face challenges which ordinarily are not there. Therefore, we will have to foresee all such situations and prepare ourselves to address all these issues. So how do we spread this message, which has been very effectively announced by Honorable Prime Minister from the Red Fort on this recently concluded ceremony of 15th of August. And we have been given a time frame that by 2024, we have to supply fortified rice through the entire public distribution system. I am particularly happy that WCD, the Women and Child Development, and the School Education and Literacy Department, looking at the vulnerability of children and students, they took decisions to supply fortified rice for their ICDS program and midday meal program from 1st of April this year. As a result of which, we got an opportunity to work through the entire ecosystem of rice fortification and prepare ourselves to something which was much bigger. ICDS and MDM together constitute a little less than 10% of the total rice supply that we make. And therefore, now we have to ramp up tenfold all our efforts to ensure that in next 2 years, we are able to cover the entire almost 800 million population of the public distribution system. We have been having regular webinars, regular meetings, and also all of us have been also touring, visiting rural areas, villages, and we notice that while we may say that our ecosystem is gearing up, but I myself noticed on the ground that a lot of ground still needs to be covered. Say, for example, when we are preparing the fortified rice kernel, the source from which the FRK mix is coming, that has to be of top quality, free of impurities, of the desired standard, and therefore even the FRK mix suppliers of the iron, folic acid and B12, they all have to be empaneled. Their standards have to be fixed, and regularly they have to be monitored that the supplies that they are doing to the FRK manufacturers, they meet these standards. Because final product is going to be only as good as the raw material is. So here for the FRK, the raw material is the mix of these 3 micronutrients. And therefore, it's extremely important that their standards are also monitored. We saw the list of 38 FRK manufacturers at the moment in the country. And I have myself seen the huge variation in the FRK supplies that they are making in terms of color, in terms of size, in terms of shape, which will create more confusion, more misconception, and more problems. As was stated very clearly, that it is very easy and it is possible and doable to match the FRK to the base grain. So therefore, we have to ensure that the FRK suppliers for each region are such and they manufacture such FRK grains which readily mix and match with the base grain which is supplied in that region. Say, for example, many DCP states like West Bengal, Odisha, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, they procure their own rice and they distribute themselves. So here, the FRK suppliers will have to match the grain of that local production. Whereas it is going to be much simpler for the suppliers of Punjab and Haryana, which account for very substantial supplies of rice to many deficit states. And the FRK suppliers here will have to match the base grain which is produced in Haryana and Punjab. So these are some of the issues on which perhaps FSSAI will also have to support us. We have already requested Bureau of Indian Standards for certain things which are very important. Number one, the standards of the machinery which is going to be used for FRK manufacturing, so that all these standards that we just talked about, they get harmonized. Likewise, we notice that blending may appear to be very simple, but if it's not an automatic, a good blender, then getting consistently ratio of 1:100 will be a challenge. And therefore, the automated blending machine also has to have a standard which is consistent, and across India it is same, so that the degree of error in the blending is not there. So this is also something on which Bureau of Indian Standards is working. And then finally, the end product, which is FRK and the fortified rice, which will be supplied. So we have already requested FSSAI to make standards for the FRK per se. The matter has already been referred to their scientific panel, and we hope to get a very final report quickly so that all stakeholders are sensitized. FCI on its part has already developed a protocol for marking the fortified rice bags and their supply. I myself, during some of the visits to Karnataka, found that fortified rice bags are being now transported across India, and they are reaching to various parts. This is a very, very big program. As Mr. Parajuli mentioned, it is a program of perhaps one of the biggest size anywhere in the world. Such a big, massive fortification program of rice, merely because of the size of population that we are catering to. This would perhaps be the biggest. And therefore, all challenges that are basically related to the scaling up are going to be there. Two very serious challenges that we face relate to the socio-cultural behavior of people, and therefore requirement of the communication, effective communication. People still feel that this is a rice which is a plastic rice or a synthetic rice. So unless they are educated and in the local language, vernacular, this messaging goes around, we have taken up some ICT campaign on our part using some of the apps like InShots, which are going to disseminate information locally among the local population, and that is what is going to be effective. So we are pursuing some of the innovative ways of communicating, and we hope that we will be able to educate people and spread awareness which is needed. But I would urge all other players on their own to join in this effort, especially WFP, FSSAI, and also WCD and School Education and Literacy Department, because they have their presence across India through their school, through their ICDS centers, and messaging through their institutions is also going to be very, very effective. So I am particularly happy that this webinar is trying to put together all such concerns and also create a platform where we all can work together. My team is excited. They have a big responsibility on their shoulders, but they have confidence that with the support, help, and collaboration of all other partners, we will be able to successfully deliver the commitment of Honorable Prime Minister. So with these words, I would like to once again thank each one of you for having taken this initiative, and would request for continued support in years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Sir. Those were certainly an insightful words from you. We heard you saying that the journey for scale up is not going to be easy, but I'm sure under your guided leadership, the department will reach new heights in the area of fortification. With this, I would now request Secretary MNOWCD, Shri Indervar Pandeji, to give away the key remarks.
Thank you. Due to some exigency, the secretary had to leave. So on his behalf, I will read the address. We are in our 75th year of independence and currently celebrating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. The nation is also observing its fourth Poshan Ma, which commenced from 1st September 2021. It has been 75 years since our independence, but as a nation, we are still struggling with the major burden of malnutrition and anemia in the country, which are major contributors to poor immunity, poor school performance, and mortality. Half of the pregnant women and children under 5 years of age in the country are anemic. This is a matter of great concern, with 20% of maternal deaths estimated to be directly related to iron deficiency anemia, and about 50% maternal deaths are attributed to it. Various measures have been taken by the government to address this issue, like early registration of pregnancy at Anganwadis, support in providing antenatal checkups to pregnant women, screening for iron deficiency anemia, iron and folic supplementation, and supplementary nutrition program, under which there is a provision of take-home rations to ensure better nutrition intake throughout the pregnancy and lactation period. Take-home rations and ready-to-use food to ensure healthy and nutritious complementary feeding of a child after 6 months of age, and hot-cooked meals for children under 5 years of age. We often talk about building a strong foundation for the lifetime to the first 1,000 days approach. To break the intergenerational cycle of malnutrition, it is important to penetrate this window of opportunity. A child's development starts right after conception, which makes it crucial to address the nutritional requirements of pregnant women. The strands of a Poshan initiative, including dietary diversification, micronutrition supplementation, food fortification, and nutrition and health education, are important strategies that can address the high burden of micronutrient malnutrition. Of these, food fortification is the most efficient on account of comparatively lower cost to implement and ability to yield significant results in a short period of time. Food fortification offers a number of advantages, as it requires neither changes in existing food patterns and behaviors nor individual compliance. Micronutrient fortification of widely consumed staple foods is considered to be one of the most effective and sustainable solutions for improving the health of entire community and creating a mass impact. Rice fortification has been taken up as India is the second largest producer and consumer of rice in the world. Rice is a staple food for an estimated 65% of the population, for whom it constitutes 31% of energy intake. Therefore, fortification of rice with essential nutrients has a potential to help aid vulnerable populations and achieve the intended target of anemia reduction. Be it through the midday school feeding program or the massive public distribution system that supplies essential grains to billions of Indians at the subsidized prices, rice finds its way to almost every Indian's plate. In this context, rice fortification becomes an ideal vehicle to bridge dietary nutrient gaps and improve health, particularly among vulnerable populations. The Ministry of Women and Child Development has already taken up the supply of fortified rice under the ICDS's Supplementary Nutrition Program. In the second quarter of the 2021-22, 20 states were exclusively allocated fortified rice. The ministry has decided that henceforth only fortified rice will be supplied under the scheme to all states. The Department of Food and Public Distribution is fully geared up to provide sufficient quantity of fortified rice to states under the scheme. I urge all the state governments and UT administrations to properly monitor the distribution and utilization of the fortified rice. It is a pressing need of ours to make people aware of the benefits of the fortified rice to increase its demand and utilization. This will reflect in our target goal of anemia reduction and will be a step towards Poshan Bharat. We understand that since it is a new initiative, so there might be resistance and hesitation in its acceptance. The onus is on us and you all to break any myths and misconceptions related to fortified rice and increase its acceptance at a larger level. With this, I wish you all the best. May you have a great learning experience through this webinar session, which will further reflect the success of this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Pallaviji, for sharing the remarks on behalf of Secretary MOWCD. The department is really grateful to MOWCD for the commitment in the area of rice fortification. With this, I would now declare the session open for the question and answer round and would request the participants to raise their hands in case they have any questions for our expert panels, Dr. Sharika and Ms. Inoshiji. So requesting participants to kindly raise a hand in case they have any questions. Okay. I can see midday meal cell Meghalaya. Ma'am,
Yes.
please go ahead with the question.
Ma'am, I would like to ask, to what extent will consumption of fortified rice through midday meal scheme, that is just once a day, meet the requirement of nutrients like iron, folic acid, and vitamin B12 to prevent anemia in school children?
Thank you for your question, ma'am. I would now request Dr. Sharika to answer this question, please.
I would now request Dr. Sharika to answer this question, please. Thanks a lot, ma'am, for your question. You're absolutely right. The amount of a single meal would be able to address would not be that great, and therefore the decision by the government to introduce fortified rice in the public distribution system, as well as the PDS and the MDM. So from one meal, the current standards that we have through the fortification levels laid out, we need to address about 30 to 50% of the recommended dietary allowances, which through one meal goes down slightly further. And therefore, the decision to ensure that whatever is available from the food-based safety nets, including the PDS, is also fortified. I hope to have answered your question. Inoshiji, would you like to add to that?
I totally agree with what you've just said, that, it's not sufficient, of course, just for a child to have one meal, and it would be really great if, fortified rice is also adopted at home, so that whenever they are having food, maybe breakfast or dinner, and they're having fortified rice, it adds on to it. But definitely, if we just start off from the school and the children are having it, they can take back the message home that this rice didn't taste any different. The cooking and look of the rice was also similar. That's it from me.
I hope your question is addressed, ma'am. Are there any other questions? Anybody else from the participants who would like to ask any question? Okay. Interimly,
Rima, can I make a small addition to the points raised just now on the Meghalaya?
Sure, sir. Please go ahead.
What is really important to understand in this context is, there is a deficit, and there is deficit of micronutrients, vitamin, and minerals in the meal. And now this effort of fortification is to complement that and educate communities and people. And as Dr. Inoshi Sharma mentioned, the idea is to have diversity in meal, either get a fortified meal, a fortified rice at home, also to look at other types of complements like vegetables, fruits, also to be added in the meal, like, pulses. So we get these additional gap, the gap which exists is complemented through their efforts. I think we all need to make effort in terms of educating students, children, and as much as possible also to make sure that the meal in a school is wholesome. It's not only rice with fortified, but also there is a good amount of lentils, vegetables, eggs or milk. These element of diversity, I think that will certainly help ultimately to have enough micronutrients going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for adding to the answers. Now, if there are no other questions from the participants, there was one question raised to us from the states itself, and it goes like, if one is taking fortified rice, is there a risk of any kind of toxicity? Or if one is taking fortified rice, one needs to stop any kind of food, other supplements that they're taking along with? I would request the guest speakers to kindly address this query also for the benefit of the larger masses. Thank you.
Okay, can I just answer on that, please? It's a very short thing. See, these standards which are created for fortified rice are actually decided by the scientific panel. So there are actually people from the scientific community who have decided what the standards will be of the fortified rice. Under no circumstances do they cross 1 RDA, which means that the levels are such that they will never reach the toxicity level. And even if a person is consuming rice 3 times a day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, even then the toxicity level will not come. So that's it from me. And even if you are having, for instance, like it was just pointed out, you are having a good diet diversity in which you are having green vegetables, you're having lentils, or you're having other forms of cereals also. They only complement to your well-being, because if it is not crossing 1 RDA, it'll never really, reach a level where it is causing toxicity. That's it from me.
Sure.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah.
Can I comment at that point?
Sure, ma'am.
So
Sure.
I think
Please go ahead.
Your question also addresses that there are multiple interventions such as iron folic acid supplementation. There's micronutrients coming from the diet, and then there is fortification. So in the space of all of this being available, is there any issue of toxicity? And what I can say, to the best of my knowledge, that there is no evidence from research or large-scale programs which indicates that multiple micronutrient interventions targeting the same age groups can provide too much micronutrients, which can then be deemed as unsafe for the population. Also, just to reiterate the point that Inoshi ji made, that the government drafts appropriate food fortification standards, taking into consideration what is available from the diet, what is the population's intake, and what is the intake from other fortified foods. I hope to have answered. Back to you, Reema.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. And there is one more question, which goes like, if the rice fortification, the process itself, the rice goes through a lot of processing. Does the processing brings about any kind of a change in the overall chemical structure of rice, which makes it unsafe? This is also kind of a myth that may be there among the larger audience. I would request the guest speakers to also address this. Thank you.
So like I just made, my presentation, see what is getting processed is only the FRK. So there is rice flour, which is almost 90 to 95%. It is just rice flour in which we are adding the micronutrients, iron, folic acid, and B12. It is then extruded into small little pellets which look just like rice. It is then added into rice. Rice as such is not touched, in the sense that the FRK is simply blended into it. So there will be like a big blender in which you take the FRK, just mix it with the main rice. So nothing is happening to your rice per se. It is just getting mixed with the FRK. So usually a lot of people, you are right, have this myth that fortified rice is totally different from the rice that we eat. There is nothing different in the rice that we are eating and what we are having as fortified rice. The only difference is that fortified rice has FRK added to it in the ratio of 1:100. So there is just one FRK kernel in 100 kernels of rice. So there is actually no processing of rice involved at all. That's it from me.
Reema, I think Inoshi answered it for both of us. So no further ado.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Sharika and Ms. Inoshi, for clarifying the doubts of the participants asked. Now with this, I would now request our Joint Secretary, Shri Jagannathan sir, to give away the concluding remarks and vote of thanks. Over to sir.
Thank you, Rima. In fact, it's been over an hour since we began this webinar on rice fortification. And I must say that I'm really amazed at the kind of ground that we have covered. So I will just briefly cover what all has transpired till now, starting with Mr. Bishop's address. Mr. Bishop, your address was all-encompassing. You nicely brought out the global perspective and then put the whole effort of rice fortification in India, which is just in its nascent stages, in the right background. And you expressed the confidence that India, being a big country, would certainly make long strides in this particular field. Thank you for doing that. Then subsequently, the presentation by Sharika, you rightly touched upon the aspect relating to public health, and you brought out how extremely well the aspect relating to the issue of a population being undernourished, because we all know that an undernourished population directly results in disability adjusted life years. And for a country like India, where a large swathe of the population remains undernourished and underprivileged, and public safety and security schemes like the PDS are the only channel of providing them and reaching out to them with nutrition, rice fortification in India couldn't have come at a better time, especially in the backdrop of the policy certainty that now we have with regard to rice fortification, with the announcement by the Honorable Prime Minister, which was also mentioned earlier. So that point was very well put across. Then coming to Inoshi's presentation, Inoshi, your presentation was spot on, because you touched upon a very critical aspect, because we have found in this country that there are many pockets where cultural changes and behavioral patterns need to be aligned with our nutritional objectives, because these are policy dictated, and we need to go a long way with the help of government agencies and other domain partners and other experts to reach out to different sections of the population to give the right perspective about rice fortification and remove the misconceptions. So that presentation was extremely informative and very powerful. Thank you for that. Then addressed by our Secretary, DFPD, Food and Public Distribution, it touched upon various aspects. In fact, as the Joint Secretary directly dealing with rice fortification, I must mention that in the last 2 years or so, ever since we embarked upon this pilot project on rice fortification, we have been at the center of developing this ecosystem by bringing together various stakeholders, development partners, industry players, sister government departments. Because as you know, again, at the risk of repetition, I must say that rice fortification ecosystem is still nascent, and we are all engaged in the process of consolidating and maturing this particular ecosystem. So this is well and truly happening, and evidence is there in the form of 7 states which are already supplying fortified rice under the pilot project in the PDS in their nominated district. Our supply chain arm, the FCI, is also procuring fortified rice, and more than 1.2 million tons of fortified rice has been procured in preparation for supplying to the ICDS and MDM programs in the country, because our annual requirement is about 50 lakh tons for these 2 programs put together. And with the kind of maturation of different supply chain and other contributors, I think sometime next year, I'm quite confident that we would be able to ensure 100% supply to ICDS and MDM, because that constitutes the most vulnerable sections like children in the ICDS, MDM, and also pregnant and lactating women. So the confidence is quite sky high as far as we are concerned. And this seminar, coming as it does at this point in time, a few days, a few weeks after the Honorable Prime Minister's address, couldn't have come a day sooner. And as we all know, finally, I would like to mention India's legacy of food security is a long and eventful one. Now, with this call of Rice Fortification and all of us, the stakeholders, coming together and joining together to work and to make this initiative a grand success in the years to come, I'm absolutely certain that the level of confidence, the level of comfort with the subject and the way we deal with it in the operational and field levels is going to go up in the months and years to come. So our target of ensuring that all the rice that we distribute in our public domain, which is close to about 35 million tons, will be fortified by the year 2024 is definitely going to be achievable and will be a grand success. So with this, I thank you all once again for making this short but very effective webinar a grand success. Thank you all once again.
Thank you, sir. Now with this, I would just like to thank Secretary MOWCD, Secretary DFPD, our Joint Secretary Jagannathan sir, our Shri Bishop Prajuli, Country Director WFP, and our guest speakers, Dr. Sharika and Ms. Inoshi Sharma, for the valuable time that they've spent for doing this webinar for the benefit of the larger audience. Thank you so much. With this, we close the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Really a pleasure. Bye.